Today we're going to be programming in Arcade. This is a visual programming language like Scratch or like we use for microbits, but it's specifically designed for creating arcade games. To view the project editor, go to arcade.makecode.com, or you can just straight go to makecode.com and then you'll find the arcade link here. So click on that and it'll open up the arcade website. So in the arcade website, you can start a new project. So there's a few different tutorials. Today, we're going to be doing the Galga tutorial, which is a kind of space shoot 'em up or an airplane shoot 'em up game. So let's click into this and then click on Start Tutorial. So this is going to load the project editor, and then on top of the project editor, we're going to have steps that we can go through step by step. So this is just a brief introduction on what we're going to be creating. So as you can see, it's a game where you're going to control your airplane up and down and fire rockets. You'll have different lives, which are represented by the hearts up the top left, and then your score is at the top right for how many you're able to shoot. So let's get going. Okay, so step one. So we're going to get a set my sprite to sprite kind of player block, and we're going to put it inside the on start. Then we're going to click on the my sprite variable and rename the variable to space plane, and then we're going to draw a picture of the space plane. So let's get going with this. So into sprites, get a set my sprite to, and it's a kind of player. And we're going to rename the my sprite variable, so it automatically has a variable in it. We're going to rename that to space plane. So let's choose rename variable and space plane. Next, we're going to click on the empty little box here to open up the image editor, and we're going to draw a picture of a space plane. Okay, so here's where I put my drawing skills to the test. So just an area for the cockpit, and then going back down, and then kind of tail at the end, and we'll get a little bit of a wing coming out from the side. Let's maybe put some white in there for the cockpit, and maybe just another color as well, something like that. And if you want, you can kind of make it look like it's shooting out some fire at the back, just propelling it. So there's my plane. Okay, so ready for the next step. So that was step 2. We're going to move on to step 3. So step 3, we're going to go into the sprites toolbox again, and we're going to pull out a set my sprite stay on screen and put it in after the other sprite block. So let's do that now. So set my sprite stay on screen. Does it specify whether we want it on or off? We'll need to change this to space plane and click the off button to make it switch to on. So as we can see, we've got a kind of toggle button here. It's off at the moment. Clicking it once will switch it to on. And then we're going to go into info and get a set a life to block and put it in there. And we're going to set the life count to 3. So what that's going to do is set at the beginning of the game on start the life to 3. So next step number 4. So now we're going to add some button actions. So in the controller toolbox, we're going to pull out a move my sprite with buttons. So let's do that into the controller toolbox. And you'll notice that the toolboxes and the blocks within them are quite stripped down. They're filtered down to only show certain ones. And they're just the ones that are applicable to this example. So it kind of makes it easier to find them. But when you're just creating a project from scratch, a brand new project, you'll get the full toolboxes and the full blocks within them. So move my sprite with buttons, and we'll need to change that to my space plane variable. So what this block is going to do is automatically be able to move the sprite using the button. So once you put that in there, I should be able to up, down, left, right. So again, this is how Arcade is really geared towards creating games. Rather than having to program each button and then program the action for how your sprite acts based on what button you've pressed, it just has a very simple move with buttons block, which does all the work for you. So we've changed it to my sprite to space plane. So we're going to click the plus symbol. So this gives us a few more options. And we're going to set Vx and Vy to 200. So Vx and Vy are velocity values. So Vx is for the x-axis, so going left and right. So the velocity there is going to be 100, and Vy is going to be 200. So that's the velocity downwards. So let's do those. So that's just the speed. So when you press a button, that's how fast it moves up or down using the velocity. So if I was to change this to 50 and click it, you can see it's a lot slower. Up and down is still 200, so it's quicker. So I'll go back to 200. Now we're going to get an on A button pressed and put it in the workspace. So on A button pressed, and we'll move on to the next. So we're going to create a projectile. So this is our rocket that will shoot out from our airplane. So in the sprites toolbox, we're going to get a set projectile to projectile from my sprite block, and we're going to put it inside the on A button pressed. So when you press a button, the A button, it's going to shoot out a projectile. So let's get the set projectile, which is this one here. So it creates a variable called projectile, and it sets it to a projectile, and we're going to be able to draw the projectile, but we need to specify where the projectile comes from. So it's going to come from the plane, our space plane. And again, we have the velocity of how fast it's going to move. So if let me see. Okay, so sorry, I skipped a little bit. So it wants me to rename the variable to Dart. Okay, let's change it. So rename variable Dart. And we've chosen spaceplane as to where the projectile comes from. And then we're going to set the Vx value to 200. So that's the speed that it travels left to right. And the speed that it travels downwards on the y-axis is 0. So it's just going to keep on going straight as opposed to kind of going downwards as well. So now we need to draw a picture of our dart or of our rocket. Okay, so let's do it a slightly different color. Maybe we'll do it in red. No, actually red is a bad color because I want to use that for the fire out the back. So getting pretty messy here. Let's clean it up a bit. So here's my rocket, and we'll do a little bit of fire coming out the back of it. Okay. So now each time you click on the A button, a rocket should shoot out, and you can see the speed that it's coming out at. So again, if I was to change that to lower, I'll move my plane to the left, you'll see it come out. And again, if I was to actually put in a value into the Vy, you'll see that it starts going down. If you were to put in a minus value, it would make it go up like that. We're going to leave it at 0 as we want it just coming straight out. Okay, next step. So we're on to step number 6. So in the sprites toolbox, we're going to get a on sprite of kind player overlaps block. And so let's just do that first. So on sprite of kind player overlap. So as you can see, it's got a long block. So on sprite of kind player overlaps other sprite of kind. And we're going to change this to enemy. Then we're going to drop destroy my sprite block in there. So what this is going to do is we're going to be creating enemies that scroll across the screen. And if our sprite, our spaceplane sprite, overlaps or crashes into any of them, then we're going to destroy my sprite. And that's going to be, so drop a destroy my sprite block in there, go up and grab the other sprite variable from the top of the block and drop it into my sprite. So we're going to take this block out and we're going to get other sprite here. So if we crash into the enemy, the enemy sprites that come across the screen, it's going to destroy the enemy sprite. Okay, so we've already deleted my sprite that was in the destroy block. You can delete it by dragging the toolbar. Now go get change life by from the info toolbox and drop it into the destroy. So we're going to change life by -1. So if you crash into something, you're going to lose a life. Okay, so let's move on to the next step, step number 7. So we're going to make a copy of the on-sprite kind player overlap. So we'll right click and click duplicate. So there we've got a copy. It shows us kind of a ghost version of it. That's because it's the exact same at the moment, and you wouldn't be able to have 2 blocks of on-sprite of kind player overlaps because they'd conflict with each other. So once we change some of this, it'll fill in with its color. So we've duplicated, and we're going to change the first kind from player to projectile. So projectile, as you can see, it pops in the color now, it's active. And also in the change life by make the life change value to be 1. So this is where your projectile that you shoot out from your plane is going to hit an enemy. If it does, it's going to destroy the enemy sprite, and you're going to get a point, or you're going to get an extra life. So now moving on to step number 8, we're going to duplicate the destroy other sprite and place the new copy after the first one. So is that in here? Let's just read on first. Like you did earlier, pull the sprite variable from the on sprite of kind projectile overlaps and drop it into other sprite in the destroy block. Okay, so we're going to pull the sprite out of here and put it in there. Oh, of course, because the projectile sprite, when a rocket hits an enemy, we want the rocket to destroy as well. So we're going to delete that. Oh, I should have duplicated first. So one of these is other sprite, and one of these is destroy sprite. I can click up here just to get a hint, just to make sure my code is right. So we're going to actually put an effect on this one here. So we're going to click on the plus, get the extra options. So it's going to destroy with a fire effect for 100 milliseconds. Okay. So let's move on to the next step. So over in game, so in the game toolbox, we're going to get an on-game update and put it in the workspace. So let's just move our blocks around a little. We're going to get a set my sprite to sprite of kind player. Put that inside. And we're going to rename the variable to bogey. So these are going to be our enemies. And then we're going to change the kind from player to enemy. So this isn't a player, this is an enemy. So our space plane is a player and this one is an enemy. And that's where this kind of comes into play. So it's when a sprite of player overlaps with enemy, or a sprite of projectile overlaps with enemy. That's where this is important, the type, the kind of sprite. So click on the empty sprite image to open the image editor and draw a picture of an enemy airplane. Okay, so let's go with green. And because the planes, the enemies are going to be flying right to left, I'm going to draw this one facing the left, coming from the right. A little bit of fire coming from the back, and let's just give a little bit of a wing on the side. Done. Okay, so let's move on to the next step. So find the my sprite velocity. Sorry, find the set my sprite velocity to and put it just after the sprite you made. Okay, so we're going to set the velocity of this sprite. So we'll change it to bogey. So set bogey to, we're going to say Vx is minus 100 and Vy is 0. So 0 for Vy means it doesn't go up or down, but a Vx value of minus 100 will mean it'll go at 100 from the right to the left. Now this keeps on kind of kicking into game over because my bogey that's getting created is getting created in the same place as my space plane, and because I have some code in here that says when they overlap it destroys it and it changes life by 1, so that's why that keeps on going to game over. But once we set our planes to come in, our enemies come in from the right, that won't happen. Okay, so so we've set the velocity. Now we're going to say set my sprite position to. So set my sprite position to. And again, this is for bogey. And we're going to set it, the x value to 180. So 180, I guess, would be over here. We can just try that by clicking on the kind of aiming tool. As you can see, this shows a live update of where the x and y is. So as we move to the right, so x 180 is going to be out here. And then for the y, we're going to put in a random block so it randomly appears in different areas. So that's in math. So pick random 0 to 10. And we're going to set that between 8 and 112. So 8 in the first one and 112 in the second. Now you can see that they're being created every half a second. A new one is being created. They're being created over on the right hand side, somewhere random up and down. So let's reset that again. And I can move my plane. And as you can see, when I crash into them, I lose a life, 1 life left. And now it's game over. So last step. So that's it. Congratulations, you've completed your game. Use the direction buttons to move your space planes to miss the bogeys and A to shoot them. Okay, so let me have a quick game of this. Let's reset. So I can use the arrow keys on my keyboard, and the spacebar acts as the A button. And as you can see, I've got 12 lives there, as I've shot quite a few of them. So if I crash in, you can see I lose a life. Also, you can see the animation effect of the fire. So when the planes get destroyed, they kind of destroy in a fire, little fireball. So we can make this a little bit better. Rather than adding on a life each time, let's just get a point. So you start off with 3 lives, that's your max amount of lives, and then you get a point. So over here where we say change life by 1, let's not do that. And oh, I don't have the full toolbox. If I exit the tutorial, I should get it. Go back in. Do I have the full toolbox? No, I don't. So maybe if I click finish, that will do it for me. Yeah, so I can save it or share it. It'll open it up, and I have the full toolbox here. So let's go into game, or info, sorry, and we're going to say change score by 1. So now you'll only have 3 lives. So I've lost 2 lives already. It's quite tricky because of the amount of them, but I'm up to 6. And I'll let myself die. There you go. So it even shows the high score at the end. So that's the tutorial for the game called Galga on arcade. It's quite a good game. I mean, you can create it quite quickly, and it's fun enough to play. So I hope you enjoyed that. If you've any questions or comments or what you'd like to see built next, just comment in the video below.